Let's jump right into this explainer and explore a fascinating psychological illusion about how we make decisions every single day. We make countless choices all the time, from what to eat for breakfast to who we're going to marry, and we generally assume we're in total control of why we make them. But what if the mere act of choosing actually rewrites your brain's code? Today, we're unpacking the science of why we believe our choices were better all along. Think about the last time you were at a clothing store. Imagine you're picking between a blue or a green shirt. You don't really have a strong preference, but you eventually just grab the green one. Well, here is the million-dollar question for you. Do you buy the green shirt because it's genuinely your favorite, or does it become your favorite simply because you bought it?
For a long time, standard economic theory and just plain common sense told us that our actions simply reflect our pre-existing desires. You like something, so you choose it, right? But modern research shows it's actually a two-way street. The act of choosing isn't just a result of your preference, it actively rewrites your preference.
This phenomenon has a formal name in psychology. It's called choice-induced preference change. It's the mental shift where we automatically start liking our choices more simply because we selected them. Our brains do not just choose what we like, they force us to like what we choose. It's basically a built-in defense mechanism against buyer's remorse.
And it's absolutely wild how powerful this effect is. In one fascinating study, participants were asked to choose between equally appealing vacation destinations. When researchers followed up, they found that this choice-induced preference didn't just last for a few hours. People still rated their chosen vacation spot higher up to 3 entire years after the initial decision.
Section 1. A major scientific plot twist. Because, as it turns out, the science here is definitely not a straight line.
For decades, researchers relied on something called the free choice paradigm. Basically, they'd have people rate items, make a choice between 2 equally rated items, and then rate them again. This consistently produced what they called the spreading of alternatives, where the chosen item's value goes up and the rejected item's value drops. It looked like absolute definitive proof of our brains resolving cognitive dissonance. But in 2010, economists Chen and Rizin pointed out a massive flaw. They argued that this apparent shift in preference could just be a statistical error called regression to the mean. This is a natural rule where extreme or noisy ratings naturally slide back toward the average when measured a second time.
So the crucial point here is that when someone rates 2 items exactly the same the first time, that rating might just be a bit noisy. It fails to capture their subtle, true preference. When you force them to make a choice, they basically reveal what they secretly wanted all along. So when they rate the items a second time, the numbers naturally adjust to reflect that hidden preference. This creates the illusion of a preference change, even if their underlying values never actually shifted.
This critique literally sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Researchers had to design entirely new experiments to control for this artifact. And when they did, well, we must be honest, early studies heavily overstated this effect. Once corrected, they found the true effect size of choice-induced preference change plummeted to 0.26, meaning the phenomenon is absolutely real, just far smaller and way more nuanced than previously thought.
Let's move to Section 2, rewriting your brain's code. Because while the behavioral effect might be smaller than we once thought, brain scans show that making a tough decision physically alters our pleasure centers, boosting the chosen item and silencing the rejected one.
When you're faced with a tough choice, your brain enters this highly coordinated loop. First, a conflict monitor detects the difficulty of the decision. Second, your cognitive control center steps in to actively update the values to build your confidence. And finally, this top-down control physically restructures your striatum, which is your brain's reward center, to actually favor the chosen item.
Russian researchers actually proved this causal link using transcranial direct current stimulation, or TDCS. This is a technique using weak electrical currents on the scalp to temporarily quiet down brain cell activity. When they used it to silence the brain's conflict monitoring center right before a choice, they found a small, one-way reduction in how much people devalued rejected items. By silencing the conflict, the brain just didn't feel the need to rewrite its preferences.
This neurobiology reveals something truly profound. Making a choice isn't just about picking an item off a shelf, right? It's a dynamic, physical process of convincing yourself that what you selected is what you truly desire. As you repeat choices, you shift from simply picking something out of convenience to genuinely believing it is your absolute favorite.
Section 3. Chasing hard-to-get targets. So, what happens when this cognitive loop goes completely wrong? Like when our brain's desire to validate past choices leads us down a toxic path of relentlessly pursuing things that don't reward us. This brings us to a really sticky concept. When we repeatedly copy our past choices, we fall into self-hurting, the habit of copying our past choices because we assume we must have had a good reason for them initially. For some of us, this builds a strong choice trace, a mental footprint tracking our past selections, leading to choice perseverance, which is the habit of repeating a choice, completely ignoring whether the outcome was actually good or bad. To test this, researchers designed a brilliant avatar experiment. Participants had to choose between easy-to-get avatars that smiled and reacted positively 90% of the time, and hard-to-get avatars that give a negative, disappointed reaction 90% of the time. Now, logically, you'd think everyone would just pick the smiling avatars, wouldn't you? Astonishingly, that is not what happened. Participants with high choice perseverance relentlessly pursued the hard-to-get avatars. And get this, through the mere act of repeatedly choosing them, those toxic, unrewarding avatars physically became more attractive to those participants. They chased a bad target, and their brain rewired their preferences to justify the chase. Section 4. The indecision of depression. We've seen what happens when the brain over-justifies a bad choice, but how does mental health fundamentally alter this decision-making loop? A healthy brain resolves the discomfort of a hard choice by devaluing the rejected options. But studies show a breakdown in this process for those with depressive symptoms. Now, we must hedge this finding a bit, as this has only been studied in a sample of Japanese college students. But the data showed that while they could increase the value of what they chose, these individuals completely failed to devalue the items they rejected. And this brilliantly illustrates why depression can be so incredibly mentally exhausting. Because they can't mentally discard the unchosen options. Their internal decision criteria remains muddy and cluttered. Every rejected option just retains its value, which perfectly explains why depression so often leads to paralyzing indecision and procrastination when it comes to making even the simplest choices. Section 5. You are what you choose. As we pull all these threads together, the crucial takeaway is that our choices are the literal building blocks of our desires. But before you assume your brain is just running on autopilot, there is one major catch. Agency is absolutely everything. Experiments prove that if a computer secretly instructs your choice, or if you feel you are forced into a decision, your internal values do not change at all. But amazingly, experiments prove that simply believing you made a choice, even if a computer secretly picked it for you, is completely enough to rewrite your values. You only learn to love the things you actively take responsibility for choosing. We don't just repeat choices because they're easy. We repeat them because our neurobiology systematically observes our actions and convinces us that our past behaviors reflect our true identity. But hey, if you ever find yourself stuck in a bad pattern and want to break this loop, science offers a bizarrely simple physical reset. Washing your hands with soap and water after a decision completely wipes away your brain's need to justify what you chose. Literally, washing your hands of the choice. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to reflect on as we wrap up this explainer. If your brain is constantly watching what you do and then actively hardwiring those choices into your permanent desires, what kind of person are your daily choices building right now? Your actions construct your identity. Make sure you are building the person you actually want to be.